I dreaded the evenings.
The setting sun, a blaze of orange and purple, always brought a familiar ache to Robert's heart.
My small apartment, usually a haven of peace, transforms into a cage of loneliness.
He tried to distract himself. Books lay open on his lap, unread. The television flickered, a dull murmur in the silence.
Nothing could quiet the restlessness that stirs within me.
He longed for connection, for someone to share the silence. The weight of his solitude pressed down on him, heavy and suffocating.
I found myself drawn to the city streets, a symphony of noise and light. The energy of the city was intoxicating, yet it also felt overwhelming. The lights, the sounds, the constant movement. It was as if the city itself was alive, breathing and pulsing with an energy that was both exhilarating and exhausting.
The crowds, a blur of faces, only amplified his sense of isolation. Amidst the sea of people, he felt like an island, disconnected and alone. The hustle and bustle of the city, the constant flow of strangers, only served to remind him of his own solitude. It was a paradox, surrounded by people yet feeling utterly alone.
I walked for hours, my feet following a familiar path. The streets were like old friends, their twists and turns known to me. Yet each step felt heavy, burdened by the weight of my thoughts. The city was a maze, and I was lost within it, searching for something I couldn't quite name. Past the brightly lit shops, the laughter spilling out from crowded restaurants. The warmth and joy inside those places felt like a world apart from my own. I could see the happiness, hear the laughter, but it was always just out of reach, like a dream I couldn't quite grasp.
Each happy face, each warm embrace was a sharp reminder of his own solitude. The sight of couples holding hands, friends sharing a joke, families enjoying a meal together, it all felt like a cruel contrast to his own loneliness. It was as if the city was mocking him, showing him what he was missing.
The city, vibrant and alive, feels like a world I can only observe, never truly join. It's a beautiful, bustling place, full of life and energy, but it's a life that I feel disconnected from. I am an outsider, looking in, watching the world go by without being a part of it.
He was a ghost, drifting through the crowd, unseen, untouched. The anonymity of the city was both a comfort and a curse. It allowed him to disappear, to blend into the background, but it also made him feel invisible, as if he didn't matter. The city was a place of endless possibilities, but for him it was a place of endless loneliness.
I paused by a park, watching couples stroll hand in hand.
Their laughter, carried on the breeze, felt like a whisper of mockery in his ears.
I envied their ease, their effortless intimacy, the way they moved together, their bodies speaking a language I yearned to understand.
Turning away, he felt a familiar pang of loneliness. The city, for all its beauty and energy, only served to illuminate the emptiness within him.
I found myself drawn to a quieter part of the city, a narrow cobbled street lit by antique lampposts casting long dancing shadows.
This was his sanctuary, a place where the city's clamour faded to a distant hum.
Here I can almost pretend that I'm invisible, lost in the labyrinthine streets.
He walked slowly, his footsteps echoing on the pavement. His thoughts, usually a jumbled mess, began to settle, like leaves falling to the ground on a still autumn day. He reached a small bridge, its wrought iron arches framing the dark, shimmering water below.
And that's when he saw her.
She was sitting on a bench, her back to him, her gaze fixed on the water. There was a stillness about her that drew him in, a sense of quiet contemplation that mirrored his own.
He hesitated, unsure whether to approach, but something about her posture, the way she seemed so completely lost in her own world, gave him courage.
He sat down on the other end of the bench, leaving a respectful distance between them. They sat in silence, each lost in their own thoughts, yet strangely aware of the other's presence.
After a while she turned to him, a small smile gracing her lips. It wasn't a forced smile, a social nicety, but something deeper, a recognition of shared solitude.
They didn't speak, at least not with words, but in the shared silence, in the gentle murmur of the river, a conversation began to unfold.
He learned her name was Sarah.
I'm an artist, drawn to the city's vibrant energy, yet often overwhelmed by its relentless pace.
We spoke of our shared loneliness, our struggles to find a place of belonging in the vastness of the city.
There was comfort in knowing he wasn't alone in his feelings.
In sharing our stories, our vulnerabilities, we began to weave a fragile connection.
A bridge built not on words, but on the unspoken language of shared experience. As the night deepened, the city lights reflecting on the water, a sense of peace settled over Robert. The city, usually bustling with noise and activity, now seemed to whisper secrets only the night could understand. The reflections on the water danced like fleeting memories, and Robert felt a strange calmness wash over him. The weight on my chest, the constant ache of loneliness began to ease. It was as if the night itself was offering a gentle embrace, a reminder that even in solitude, there was a kind of beauty to be found. The air felt lighter, and for the first time in a long while, I could breathe without the heaviness that usually accompanied each inhale.
It was connection, not just any connection, but a deep, unspoken bond that transcended words. It was the kind of connection that made you feel seen, truly seen, for who you were beneath all the layers of pretense and facade.
He realized it wasn't love he craved, not in the romantic sense. It was the simple act of being understood, of having someone who could look into his eyes and see the unspoken words, the silent cries for companionship. It was the comfort of knowing that he wasn't alone in his thoughts, that someone else could share in his silent struggles.
A recognition that someone else saw me, heard me, understood the silent language of my soul. It was a rare and precious gift, one that I had longed for without even realizing it. The simple act of being acknowledged, of having my existence validated by another, was enough to lift the weight that had been pressing down on me for so long.
He looked at Sarah, her profile outlined against the shimmering water. She stood there, a quiet presence in the night, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the turmoil that had been raging inside him. In that moment, he realized just how much her presence had meant to him, how her silent companionship had been a balm to his weary soul.
I wanted to tell her how much her quiet presence meant to me, how she'd unknowingly eased my loneliness. But the words caught in my throat, trapped by the fear of breaking the delicate balance we had found. Instead, I simply stood there, hoping that somehow she could feel the gratitude and affections that I couldn't quite put into words.
But the words wouldn't come, and in that moment he realized it didn't matter.
The silence between us was no longer empty, but filled with a profound understanding.
He didn't need to explain his loneliness, his longing for connection. She already knew.
And in that knowing, I found a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was seeking.
They parted ways as the first light of dawn touched the city skyline.
No promises were made, no expectations set. Yet I knew something had shifted within me.
He walked back through the awakening city, the streets slowly coming to life. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the distant hum of early morning traffic. As he moved through the city, he noticed the small details that often went unnoticed. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees, the sound of birds chirping, and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. Each step he took felt like a new beginning, a chance to see the world with fresh eyes.
The city, once a symbol of my isolation, now felt different. It was still vast, still overwhelming, but it was also beautiful, full of possibilities. The towering buildings, the bustling streets, and the myriad of faces all seemed to tell a story of resilience, of dreams, and of endless opportunities. I began to see the city not as a place that swallowed me whole, but as a canvas where I could paint my own journey. The energy of the city was infectious, and I found myself drawn to its rhythm, its pulse, and its heartbeat.
He was still alone, yet he no longer felt lonely. There was a newfound sense of peace within him, a quiet contentment that came from understanding that solitude was not something to be feared, but something to be embraced. He realized that being alone did not mean being disconnected. In fact, it was in these moments of solitude that he felt most connected to himself, to his thoughts, and to the world around him. He found joy in the simple things, in the taste of his morning coffee, in the warmth of the sun on his face, and in the gentle breeze that whispered through the trees.
I carried Sarah's quiet presence with me, a reminder that even in the midst of millions, connection was possible. Her memory was like a soft, comforting blanket that wrapped around me, providing warmth and solace. I would often find myself reaching for the locket she had given me, feeling its smooth surface and remembering the moments we shared. It was in these small, quiet moments that I felt her presence the most. And it was in these moments that I realized that true connection transcends physical proximity. It is a bond that exists in the heart, in the soul, and in the memories we hold dear.
He had found solace not in escaping his solitude, but in embracing it, in recognizing that it was a shared human experience. He understood that everyone, at some point in their lives, feels alone, but it is in this shared experience of solitude that we find our common humanity. He began to see solitude not as a void, but as a space for reflection, for growth, and for self-discovery. It was in these quiet moments that he found clarity, that he found strength, and that he found a deeper understanding of himself and the world around him.
And in that shared experience, I had found a connection that transcended words, a connection that had the power to transform even the loneliest of nights. It was a connection that was felt in the heart, in the soul, and in the quiet moments of reflection. It was a connection that reminded me that I was never truly alone, that I was part of something greater, something beautiful, and something eternal. And it was in this realization that I found peace, that I found joy, and that I found a sense of belonging that I had been searching for all along.